Alright, we've got one package with good stuff in it. So first we have, is it wrong to pick up Girls in the Dungeon Season 4? This is part 1, isn't it? Doesn't it say? What does it say? That doesn't say. I'm pretty sure this is not all of it. Oh. Get this plastic off first, and then take a look at the back. The back here, it should yeah, that's episode 12 to 22. So then this is part 2. Part 2, there we go. Took a while to find that. I'm pretty sure it's on here somewhere. Oh, up there, part 2. Okay, maybe y'all were seeing that and I just didn't notice it. Nice and simple. Good to have. Next up we have the... There's a word right there in between tunnel and summer, which I think is the word in the tunnel to summer, the exit of goodbyes. Which looks like a pretty movie, but I will admit I don't know anything about it. As I'm taking this plastic off. Go. Well, there we mostly go. Stupid plastic. Gosh. It's been doing this for ever. I wonder what's that up with that. So let's see. We see there's an English dub. Region A. Movie on one disc. So nice and straightforward on the inside. There we go. And I forgot to check for this one. I know it should be dubbed. That's Region A there. And yeah, dub and sub. Always good to double check and make sure. Here we have One Piece Season 13 Voyage 4. It's interesting because this one almost did not make it onto my radar because it wasn't listed under anime properly on Amazon. But I am getting better at figuring out how to use Crunchyroll's store to figure out 8:19 to 8:30. Figuring out how to use Crunchyroll's store to oh, loose disc. So these look like disc 1. DVD and Blu-ray versions. That did not want to close correctly, did it? And then disc 2. Disc 2. I guess that feels closed. Didn't sound like it closed, but yeah, okay, guess it. And then last but not least, Tsurune, the First Shot, the movie. Interesting that the face recognition on the camera is recognizing the face of that guy there. I mean, I've noticed it recognized stuff here and there, but I don't know. I guess it's kind of funny that's recognizing an anime character's face, a drawing face. There's still some plastic there. So annoying. But I guess we'll look at the back. We see Region A. We see Japanese with English subtitles only. Where does One Piece contain that information? Down here. Guess it's worthwhile. It's Region A. It's going to have its dub, of course. So... yeah, a bunch of Region A stuff, but this one is subtitled only. Seems worth noting. And it's not a whole lot, but here's this week's physical anime collection update. Alright, we've got a lot of anime to go through. Some additional stuff aired, some new season series continuing. Let's begin with, I did put, in some of my extra time today, I decided to watch Drugstore in Another World. And I've watched the first 4 episodes of it, and it's kind of fun. I can see why it's not rated that high. There's not really a whole lot driving you to really watch it on an episode by episode basis, but I found it was just kind of amusing to just have on. Not exactly in the background, but kind of. Not an engaging story, just kind of amusing. Some of the characters I actually think are quite adorable, but maybe not everybody would think the same. But, you know, I've given it at least 4 episodes, and I might watch some more after I record this video. I guess I don't know. I have to make sure I'm prepared to actually leave the apartment tomorrow. You know, I got MLK Day off, so, you know, I got to just kind of stay inside while it's chilly out. But, no, can't do that. Let me see. We got the first episode of Villainous Level 99. I may be the hidden boss, but I'm not the Demon Lord. Also, on this thing where I'm rating on how effective a first episode it is, you know, I'm going with the standard. It was okay, as in it caught up to the synopsis, I believe, but it didn't go past it. It was very interestingly executed, and I'm still looking forward to seeing episode 2. But I also don't quite know what kind of series it's planning to be execution-wise. One of the interesting... no, I don't know if I want to talk about that about the first episode, but, you know, it was entertaining enough. Let me see. We got episode 2 of Gushing Over Magical Girls, which I'm glad that it's not falling into the trap of, okay, this is just episode 1 part 2. It does seem to be building up and doing some maybe complicated's too much of a overstructure, not quite the right word, but it's doing something. It's hard to really say if I feel like this is a great show that I'm going to continue watching, or if it's just one that I won't care for. But it is what it is, I guess. Classroom of the Elite, Season 3, Episode 2. What happened in this episode? I guess you had some of that stuff happening. And I guess, if anything about it, I'm just trying to think if maybe it felt like our main character isn't quite being utilized completely, or rather that the stuff that happened is hard to tell if it's completely relevant to them or not. In some ways, yes. I don't know. It was kind of nice, but I think we're still waiting to see season 3 really build up, I guess. Dr. Elise, the Royal Lady with the Lamp, episode 1. So based on this rating of first episodes, I would actually say this is not a very good first episode. I mean, it seems like it's potentially a really good series, but it didn't even catch up with the synopsis. So I guess it's kind of a weak first episode, but still entertaining. Still have some interest in seeing where it's going to go. I guess some parts of me felt like episode 1 could have almost been like its own standalone short story sort of thing, and it actually would have been kind of pretty. So it's a good first episode in that regard. But beyond that, we definitely need more than episode 1 to tell what kind of series it's going to be in general. Metallic Rouge. I didn't care for it that much. I would say it's a kind of... Well, I guess I don't know. See, I remember putting it on my list as I'll check it out, and I guess I wasn't entirely sure how much I was remembering of the synopsis. So it's hard to say if it really covered much, because I think the synopsis was just kind of a little empty. Like, just sort of a plop, here's the world kind of description. And maybe the first episode is like that. And beyond that, I don't know if it was just it didn't grab my attention. I was doing other stuff or anything like that, but it didn't grab my attention in terms of how it was trying to build its world. So it just sort of like felt like things happened, and beyond that, I guess it would mostly be a question of, you know, what would people enjoy about this? And I think people into cyberpunk may really like it. It's got some good budget, and it's got some neat visuals and neat looking characters. But I'm not sure that I found anything that got me too invested in it. Partially because I felt like I guess I was just too... It just kind of threw some information. I'm like, I don't feel like I'm being introduced to this world. I feel like... And, you know, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think people who are really into cyberpunk may actually be perfectly fine to it because, you know, it feels like it's got a lot of that cyberpunk aesthetic to it. Really well. But as someone that doesn't like cyberpunk because of cyberpunk, you know, I would say that something like Psychopaths felt like a better first episode. And I'm remembering this, and I obviously got to watch beyond the first episode when I first viewed it because I watched that one as it came out on DVD Blu-ray. But I kind of remember the first episode feeling like I understood the why of the world, the why of why the anime had the why of the world. I know that's a really weird way to say it, but I felt like that one started off better. Now, not everything has to start off as good as everything else. But I'm just saying that, you know, episode 1, I felt like maybe it was okay for the synopsis, but I think it's kind of a weak synopsis. And I thought beyond that it was a weak first episode, but not necessarily a hopeless first episode. A lot of stuff there. Let me see. Sengoku Yoko, episode 1. I would say weak first episode because it's not catching up to what the synopsis has told us about it. But it's definitely looking interesting. We just have to see where it's going to go as it gets deeper into the synopsis. But a part of me worries that based on the setup of the first episode, the synopsis isn't even necessarily something that it might explore in the first 3 episodes. So, I don't know. That it's an interesting thought, I suppose. But I guess we'll have to see. But otherwise, I remember it being pretty entertaining. It definitely, I think a coworker I talked to this about, I agree with his idea that if this anime had actually come out like a decade or 2 ago, it would be actually very spectacular. Like, if it was competing with Rurouni Kenshin, it'd compete with it pretty well in terms of kind of having that sort of look and feel for that time period sort of thing. And maybe people would watch them for different reasons, but, you know, it feels like maybe it's slightly outside of its era. It's not necessarily bad, but I guess we'll have to see where it goes from here, because I thought it set up just fine. Delicious in Dungeon, episode 2. Entertaining enough. I don't think there was anything particularly mind-boggling from a story that happened in it, but I also think it's not the kind of show where you expect that. Where you mostly just see, okay, here's where it introduces this dish, that dish. And in that regard, it's actually pretty entertaining. Chain Soldier, episode 2 is kind of turning me off from the series. It doesn't help that I don't like 2 of the girls. Maybe 3, but I don't know the relationship between the main character and the main girl, what exactly that is like. And part of it is, you know, it's an anime that's strong in the sadism, masochism sort of relationship, and that's not the kind of relationship that I would be into. So there may be something there that doesn't click with me. But at the same time, I guess I'm waiting to see what do I think of her as a character, because, you know, she could be fine, or she could be just manipulative, using him. Manipulative might not even be the right word. Objectifying, well, she doesn't think well of him. Now, this episode made me think that there's a possibility that it might not be that, but it didn't explore that too much because it was exploring one of the other characters who I think we're supposed to find endearing, but honestly, I want to punch her in the face. But, whatever. My instant death ability is so overpowered. Episode 2, what happened in this episode? Let's see. That was a very funny concierge. But I'm trying to think what happened from a major story perspective, I guess. Some interesting stuff happened. But nothing's jumping out too much impression-wise. So this is maybe going to be an okay series, but maybe not great. It's hard to tell. And I did watch the first episode of The Witch and the Beast. That wasn't originally on my list, because I don't know. I guess some of the descriptions maybe feel like maybe it wouldn't be a story-based thing, and I'm like, do I want to watch something where every individual episode is just kind of its own little one-off episode? Not that I think it's that, but I don't know. I guess something about its artwork reminds me of something like Witch Hunter Robin, which definitely had an overarching story plot, but definitely was very episodic. And I guess I wasn't quite sure what to make of it, so it wasn't high priority. But reading it, it's like, okay, there's some fantasy elements involved here, and I think it was okay with what it was doing with some of them. But I feel like it's only okay. So I can't really judge it from a synopsis perspective, because I'm not sure if I even understood the synopsis enough to compare the two. It doesn't seem like a bad series. I just don't know if it's hitting my particular tastes, I guess. Next up, Sasuke and Peeps, episode 2. Actually, I think this was a fun episode. At least that entire interaction right there was fun. I'm trying to remember if there was enough to it that I can say there was a lot of strong isekai stuff for it or not. Because I feel like while it's there, it's not what the show is primarily trying to do. And in that regard, it's actually kind of nice how it's all mingling together. Although that said, I think with the ending of this episode, it's difficult to tell where they're going to go for episode 3. But I do appreciate the fact that from what it's done so far, it's not leaning too hard on the isekai concept, but it is an important part of it as far as I can tell. So, just really neat, really pleasant. I really like the main character. He gets put in situations that he's uncomfortable with and doesn't handle well. But he also kind of has that, okay, yes, and he's like in his 30s or 40s or something, so he has that age of time maturity thing where it's like, well, I know how to handle this, not because I know how to handle this specific situation, but because he kind of knows how to deal with situations where he doesn't know what to do. Kind of pleasant. Let's see, The Unwanted Undead Adventurer, episode 2, actually was pretty great, I thought. If I were to try to place it, I think it's because it goes, as it goes beyond what the synopsis had, which I think the episode 1 was only up to synopsis, maybe ever so slightly beyond that, but not giving us an idea of how our main character would interact with the world. If it was one where he was just on his own, well, let's face it, this isn't Spider, where the characters' whimsical thoughts to themselves were a strong driving point earlier on, as well as their interaction alone in this world. But for him, it's showing some of that stuff, but it's also done a good job of showing his integration into the world at large and not keeping him just some isolated universe. And his interactions are neat, fresh, unique, very engaging with the premise of the show. Just overall, very nice. And I think I saw the ratings for that series jump up a whole lot. Maybe after episode 2, maybe a lot of people just enjoyed episode 1. But no, I think people just really liked episode 2. I know I did. I feel a lot better about the series Frieren, Beyond Journey's End, episode 18. What happened in this? I'm remembering what's happening in it. I'm just trying to think if I can give any thoughts about it. It's really nice stuff because it's definitely seeing more interaction with Frieren than that's more, I guess, on the level of who she is. Is that a good way to put it? What she is, I guess. Like, instead of who she is. So, like, who she is she was a member of Himel's party to defeat the Demon King. And so, you know, people can look at her and interact with her in that regards, like, oh, yes, here's some reminiscing of this person that you saw 80 years ago who was a kid back then, but now they are an old woman on their deathbed or something like that. You know, that's a common interaction in the show. There's the stuff that she kind of does there in the meantime, but we didn't really get to see a lot of her being mage, and not just a mage, but a powerful mage. And we even have an episode called A Powerful Mage. But this one, I think, is starting to tap into exploring some of that stuff in a way, with a different set of characters in a different place, with a different purpose, and they're very careful not to just, like, go overboard with it and, I guess, burn through material quickly, so to speak. And I don't mean burn through material as in, like, the anime implementing manga chapters quickly. I mean, like, maybe this could even be the manga not saying, all right, well, we all know that Friren's a powerful mage, but what exactly does that mean? Well, we don't see that on a, like, episode by episode basis to the point where we're like, okay, we get it already, she's a powerful mage. You know, a series can overwhelm its welcome by doing the thing it's doing well, but too much too fast. You especially see this with comedy shows, which do come up with a great comedic idea, but only like the first couple of episodes are funny, because after that it ran out of steam or juice for or momentum for itself. I can think of shows like I think Club to Death Angel, Ramen Fighter Miki, I was thinking of another one. You know, those are some that I felt like they were comedically strong, very strong at the beginning, but they burnt out through their comedic material too fast. And Friren's not doing that with its storytelling material, so it's continuing to be good. The Wrong Way to Use Healing Magic, episode 2. Fun episode. I think if episode 1 was a weak first episode because it did not get past the synopsis, episode 2 has gotten past the synopsis to the point where I'm not sure if it's really gotten past the synopsis, but it's at least gotten far enough along that we're like, okay, now we're seeing some of the personality that this show has, and it's very entertaining. And I think episode 3 is important because I get the impression from the progression in episode 2 and the ending of episode 2 that this isn't a show where the main character spends the whole time training how to use healing magic the wrong way. Yeah, the wrong way. And like it's mostly training. It almost feels like it is planning to go beyond that in a good way. And I'm looking forward to seeing if episode 3 kind of confirms that. We got the first episode of The Weakest Tamer began a journey to pick up trash. And it was a simple, touching, heartfelt first episode, I would think. I'm not sure if we got much beyond the basic premise, but it at least did an okay job of not only catching us up, but helping us fully understand the basic premise. So, I'm looking forward to seeing more of that, learning more about that. Solo Leveling, episode 2. Still not caught up with the synopsis, but I do believe that it's maybe right on the cusp of it, so this is probably a 3-episode anime. Maybe it's still an entertaining enough first episode. Much better second episode, I would say, because it's actually doing something, I guess. But oh well. Overall, entertaining. The Strongest Tanks Labyrinth Raids, Episode 2. I'd call it a kind of weak first or second episode. I guess because Episode 2 spends a lot of time setting stuff up, barely touching on what I would say is the fundamental premise of the show that, you know, the title at least gives us. You know, it instead almost gives the impression that it's like, oh, it's going to be an anime about how he has that stuff, but he is retiring. Which, you know, we have that. We have Banished from the Heroes Party. But that one, you know, the entire premise of that other show is that they decided to live a quiet life in the countryside. You know, that's the continuation of the title. And so that one you can kind of tell, okay, well, maybe stuff happens, but you're expecting a retirement to a quiet life in the countryside as kind of being the fundamental premise. Whereas Strongest Tank doesn't really give that impression from its title or its synopsis. And maybe based on the end of the second episode, it isn't planning to do that on an episode by episode basis, but it still felt a little out of place. And in addition to that, it had a couple of things about it that were they felt inconsistent, and I think the anime to a certain degree knows this because it addressed some of those like very directly. So for example, our main character, we already knew, okay, well, he's dungeoning because she's sick and he needs a thing to help her. But why is she standing up at home preparing food for them like she's just a stereotypical sister character? In other words, she's not sick, she's sick apparently, but they make the impression that it was such a big deal, that it was a big thing in their childhood. So it's just like, well, there feels like an inconsistent characterization there, and I don't know that they entirely addressed that. They kind of insinuated that some of the medicines that were being given to her helped her a lot and gave her times where she could be like that. And it does also answer the question of, okay, if he's off adventuring, what's happening to his sister who's so sick that she's going to die? You know, I think we got a good answer to that sort of stuff. But then she also prepared food for him, even though she shouldn't have known he was coming to town. But they did say that she kind of had a blessing that may have given her that intuition that she's tapping into without knowing about it. So, okay, but worrisome because it's a weakening episode 2 compared to an okay episode 1, I would say. It built up and revealed some stuff, but I think if you're like me, you're entering episode 2 here thinking, well, that's cool stuff, but what kind of show are you planning to be? It feels like I'm getting conflicting messaging here. So it might just only be an okay series, and we'll find out. Tales of Wedding Rings, episode 2. Okay, so this episode gave us a better idea of the harem nature of it, and I think it's fine because it's addressing it while saying we want to still be about a strong relationship. Now we're going to have to see how future interactions with other characters goes, but overall I'd say the interaction between the characters was pretty nice. Do I have anything else to say about it? Or beyond the first premise? And I think we got enough in episode 2 to say, well, that's entertaining. Maybe you can make a good judgment on if you'd like the show or not based on the first 2 episodes. We'll have to see if episode 3 really changes that, but I feel like it's starting off okay enough. Ragnar Crimson, episode 13. So it resumed after its, 1 month, couple weeks? I don't remember how long it's been. There was a break there, and it was not a very well-timed break. It just sort of was there in the middle of things happening. And I don't mean like it was there and something was about to happen. Literally, the stuff started happening and then it took a break. I don't know how much I care for the stuff that did happen. It's okay enough, kind of cool, I think. But it does feel dangerously detached from this being a story about our main titular character or characters. You know, both the characters in the title. I'm not sure how much we saw Crimson. And some of the Ragnar interactions just like, okay, fine. But I'm not sure if it was his strongest material. So it's kind of a weak resumption, but it didn't pause at a good place either. Fluffy Paradise episode 3. So this is the third episode of this, and we should talk about what the 3-episode rule of this one reveals. So it's been nice, kind of happy, neat to see, I guess, the different things that our main character's gotten to be introduced to. So if we're using the 3-episode rule, I could see people dropping this show because it hasn't really shown much of a story or premise. It may be kind of similar to Drugstore in Another World, although I'm not sure if it's necessarily as bad. I don't know. I could see people having radically different opinions on which one they would prefer more over the other. Because if there's anything wrong with Fluffy Paradise, it's that it's shown that its ideas, you know, that stuff. There is a thread of a real idea in there, in that maybe there is an overall story about, you know, she was resurrected into this world to help judge whether or not the people in there should be allowed to continue living, or if maybe the gods should clear people out or something like that. And so in theory our main character is supposed to be judging that sort of thing, but they're not doing that. How much their isekai-ness has to do with stuff that's going on is a little light. Especially since the main character still kind of acts like a 5-year-old girl, I suppose. You know, which is really weird because, you know, you can kind of understand if maybe she wasn't as used to using her body, or maybe the language or something. But her mannerisms are also very little kid-ish as well, and so it's strange. I guess to a certain degree, Weakest Tamer also had the concept of it's sort of an isekai, but I think that one did a better job of the does this need to be an isekai question mark, because in that one we experience things through our main character and they just get insights, usually in the form of an internal voice that we don't get to hear talking about stuff, and maybe just giving them better insight. So that one works pretty well because it's almost like two characters and not just a resurrected character. But Fluffy Paradise feels a little inconsistent in that regard. But, you know, if there isn't much of a story that develops, the first 3 episodes kind of give you the impression that you probably shouldn't expect that. You would just expect, okay, interactions between characters and maybe more interactions between our main character and animals. And I think if you're anything like me, the main thing you're probably wondering in that one is, are there half human, half animal, like beastmen or something like that? And how does her gift work with them? And does that start giving us interesting insights or not? It's hard to say. Banished from the Heroes Party, Season 2, Episode 2. I think it was a nice episode. Like, you expect it to be quiet, but this one had a little more action to it than maybe usual for the show. But it is... I was going to say, is it introducing kind of a central conflict? It is. I thought they actually resolved a conflict that was the closest we've seen to a central conflict so far in this season. 2 episodes in, you know, that's kind of record time. But I guess there's a goal for our main character, and that goal was not accomplished, and this, I think, leans towards the quiet life in the countryside aspect to it pretty well. So, you know, maybe that's what we focus on. I think episode 3 will hopefully help answer that question. 7th Time Loop. The villainess enjoys a carefree life married to her worst enemy. Episode 2. I thought it was a great second episode. If for episode 1 only got us to the premise, episode 2 kind of showed us what it was maybe thinking of doing with that. And I think it showed a lot of promise. Like I said, you know, based on how the first episode and synopsis set stuff up, to make this show interesting, you should have elements of her past lives be relevant to stuff that's happening right now. And episode 2 showed us, yes, that's exactly what we're planning to do. Now, if there's anything to worry about with episode 2, it would be if they're going through that sort of material either too fast, or showing that, yes, it will come up, but it's not going to be that notable. It's sort of like, it's established that Our main character died because of a war that happened in all 6 of her previous lifetimes. And it would occur to me that, you know, a kind of really well-feeling show would involve everything she did in her 6 past lives was somehow needed in this 7th life to prevent all the things from that war from happening. And at best it maybe seems to imply, could that war have just been the guy getting bored and deciding to go to war for entertainment? And because she's going to be entertaining him, that's not going to happen? If so, then this show has gotten rid of some good premise material really quick. So, we'll have to see where it goes from here, because that may be the problem, the risk of this show, is that it may run out of interesting stuff like that to do, and then after that, it's just shoujo. Which is okay, but, you know, I'd say that shoujo, based on the founding principle of the anime, is more interesting than just shoujo. And, yeah, I guess we'll have to see where it goes. Tsukimichi Moonlit Fantasy Season 2, Episode 2. I'm glad they did this episode at the timing that they did. So, at the end of the previous season, they did establish that there were 2 other heroes from our main character's world present in that world that he just had yet to meet. And that could have meant that Season 2, Episode 1 could have began with them, but I like that Episode 1 began with our main character seeing our main character do something very interesting that our main character does and showing some interesting personality that I didn't feel like we were getting very clearly at the end of Season 1. But then Season 2, Episode 2 is when it's introducing and catching us up to those other 2 heroes. Now, if I was using the same 3-episode rule for a second season here, I would say we definitely need a 3rd episode, because if Episode 1 caught us back up and Episode 2 showed us, oh, but these heroes are going to be more relevant for the series, Episode 3 is where it tells us what that execution means. With my biggest fear being that we don't get enough with our main character. One thing that was nice about this first season is watching things progress through our main character's perspective primarily. And I want to see more of that. And so in Season 2, my hope would be they've introduced the heroes. I hope they don't sideline our main character. Like Season 2, Episode 1, slightly sidelined 2 of the characters because they are not the ones traveling with them. And that's fine. It's just kind of entertaining banter for us to see what they're doing, what they're up to, and how they're maybe developing as characters. But for the most part, we want to see them interacting with our main character, and we want to see things through the perspective of our main character. Okay. So we have to see if Season 2, Episode 3, what they're going to be doing now that they've given this information versus the focus, because there's a lot of flashes of the other 2 heroes' parties, I think in the ending credits, which makes me worry that, you know, it's going to be divided 3 or 4 ways or something like that, and it shouldn't be. I guess we'll have to see. The Foolish Angel Dances with the Devil, Episode 2. This episode almost had me rolling my eyes too hard and not wanting to watch it. The interaction between the angel and the demon at the beginning of the episode, I agree with some of the comments from Crunchyroll that it'd be better to describe it as abusive. It's not good, and some of the people didn't quite understand what he was saying. Somebody else was saying that, you know, this always leads to disaster, and somebody said in the manga it turned out just fine. It's like, yeah, and you know, they can make shit up in the manga that has absolutely nothing to do with real life, but people who say, oh, maybe this is a good, healthy relationship for them, I don't know. More often than not, I agree with the person. 1, 2, 3, 4 people are telling themselves little lies, like, oh no, this is perfectly fine, this is the kind of relationship I want, but it turns out to be a bad thing. It was quite disappointing, and another one pointed out that, you know, this is kind of reminiscent of Redo of Healer, and I would say that the beginning of this was actually worse than that. See, Redo of Healer did 2 things in order to kind of make its cringy stuff sort of work. Somebody was right that it is torture porn, But that's the idea, is it knew that what it was doing was torture. Horrible, absolutely horrible stuff. It didn't pull any punches in that regard. It knew, oh yes, this is something super horrible happening here. But that's the thing, is it knew it was doing that. This one, it's hard to say. I mean, it seems to be fetishizing it, but it's abusive, bad stuff. It's like, it shouldn't be playing it for laughs. This was objectively bad stuff. And the other thing Redo of Healer did was it actually gave us reason to think, okay, this absolutely is deserved to a certain degree. I mean, maybe our character's taken around, but something deserves to happen to these people because they're such horrible people. Whereas, again, this one is doing rom-com stuff. Now, that said, going further into episode 2, it was just more entertaining. Now, it is just rom-com stuff at that point, but people are comparing it favorably to, like, Love's War. And I didn't get enough into that to care too much for it myself. But, you know, I'd say it was more entertaining and funny. So, if you didn't like it, definitely get past the first part of episode 2, because I feel like that's a better material to judge what this series may be trying to do long term. I don't think it's long term Love is War per se, but the fact that it can go there is good for it. And then finally, episode 2 of 'Tis Time for Torture Princess. And for the most part, I would say it was entertaining. You know, I think first episode you can kind of tell, I don't know that I need to care too much. This show isn't actually taking itself too seriously. It's another one of those ones where you're just watching episode by episode and saying, yeah, that's kind of funny and nice. One of the things I appreciate about episode 2 is episode 1 was all food temptations, which are good, you know. There's a lot of shows that are like, okay, well, let's just look for an excuse to have people preparing food and basically giving food porn, food ASMR, something like that. But episode 2's like, I'm going further beyond that. It's doing other stuff. And so, in that regard, it's like, okay, well, it doesn't feel like it's going to use up its material too fast, per se. But, I guess, being a comedy, me mentioning all the other comedies, it's very possible it could use up its material too quick. We'll have to see. But, overall, yeah, entertaining enough. So, do I have anything to add beyond that? Spent a bit more time on Pokemon, mostly just hunting for a couple of shinies that were harder to get. Timing and stuff seemed a little bit better. So, for example, getting a shiny Feebas, I am using the date reset method to, you know, just go in, select OK on my clock, go back into the game, and that updates your raids and your outbreaks. And you just keep doing that until you get the Feebas outbreak. I think before I couldn't really do that because I had holiday data still on there, but there was a reason that I needed to connect online. Oh yes, to get the special item to do the extra final DLC stuff. So, you know, that cleared all my holiday data. I got to do the Feebas and get myself a shiny Milotic, which I actually had to reset and do a second time because the first Milotic I got was male. And, you know, for the most part I've been saying, well, some of these Pokemon I would prefer to be female over male. For the most part, it doesn't matter. But a Milotic makes sense because there is a gender difference in that the females have longer tendrils. And it's like, no, need the longer ones. Sorry, male Feebas, I'm going to reset and get another one again. Frustrating stuff. Also surprisingly frustrating to get that shiny Cutiefly, so I could get a shiny Ribombee. Again, that one ended up males. You know, that tends to happen. But, you know, and I'm training up raid Pokemon, and some of these are just weird raid Pokemon, and you don't have to think too much about them. Like, if you're wondering what I did with my Milotic, I was mostly thinking it's a good anti-special attacker, because it's already got good HP special defense stats, but it learns was it Skitter Smack, which lowers special attack stat. So it has a way to force the opponent's special attack to keep going down. And because of that, it can help its allies a whole lot. And then what do you do beyond that? Not entirely sure, but one thing I decided to do was, life do so you can heal everybody without using the cheer, I think. A Dragon Pulse. It's not Dragon Pulse. Maybe it's Dragon Rage. 30% chance to paralyze. Seems like it's a nice option to spam if you've got the other stuff. It may also do a light screen. I'm trying to remember what all I put on there, but the idea is, yeah, it does a fine enough job. It's mostly an excuse to have in my Melodic, because my Melodics are among my favorite. Rabombi is also quite nice. That one's a weirder Quiver Dance stat, but Quiver Dance combined with Skitter Smack, or the other Skitter, which there seem to be two of them that lower special attack. And Rabombi, seems fine in that regard. And yeah, the Rabombi one might not work too well just because of how frail Rabombi is, but the fact that I put all of its IVs or EVs into HP and special defense, and it's fast enough to probably pull off that first Quiver Dance before the opponent can, that makes me think it should be fine. Just one or two of those, and then all of a sudden that Drain Kiss is probably getting enough HP back to heal. And, probably Quiver Dance, Skitter Smack, Quiver Dance, Drain Kiss. And if it pulls off one more Quiver Dance, I can also have it Terrasilize and use Stored Power, which would be a Power 200 attack off of a special attack stat that doesn't have much investment, just the 4 extra special attacks, or the 4 extra EVs into special attack, but fun stuff. Got me a shiny Malamar. Although I think I've got 2 different builds for what I want for Malamar, and so this one's kind of not committed to either. It's somewhere in the middle. But Malamar is really interesting because it's 2 main strategies. One of those is it can be a support Pokemon whose goal is to skill swap, contrary onto the raid Pokemon, so that if the raid Pokemon does something like use Bulk Up or Swords Dance, which, Blaziken, which is live again this coming weekend, does, well, since those are scripted and not things that it thinks about doing, it's just going to lower its own stats. You're also completely getting rid of its speed boost. So it no longer has speed boost, it's no longer getting faster and faster and faster. So your Pokemon are probably outmaneuvering it. And so at that point, it's like, okay, if you skill swap that over to them, what are you going to do at that point? Well, at that point, you're playing support. And that could mean a couple of different things. There's some interesting options there. Helping Hand, the fact that it has Helping Hand means that it can really help your allies in that regard. So that's good. You can also put that speed boost onto a different ally Pokemon if you really want to. Yeah, interesting options, but it's also interesting to say there's also offensive options to consider. Namely, if you don't skill swap Contrary and you keep it, then there are 2 attacks that are really helpful. One of those is, of course, Superpower, and this is one of the most well-known things. Is Contrary plus Superpower is a physical defensive Pokemon that just gets bulkier and attacks stronger, and you're doomed. It just keep using it and gets stronger and stronger. But it's also interesting to use Terra Blast with the Stellar Terra type, because normally that's a bad thing. You use that attack and your attack and special attack go down, but for Contrary Pokemon, they'll go up instead. So those seem nice. And I just listed 4 attacks, and if that's like, oh, why is there a problem? Why is there 2 different roles? Well, the big problem is if you're skill swapping Contrary onto the enemy Pokemon, there's one additional interesting move that Malamar learns that can be very helpful. Namely, Swagger. See, Swagger normally raises the opponent's attack by 2 stages and confuses them. But if you skill swap Contrary onto them and you use that, their attack goes down by 2 stages and they become confused. Now, the main reason you might not want to use that on a raid Pokemon, you have to come up with an idea of doing more, I guess. So one of the big problems there is once the raid shield goes up, you can't do that anymore. They might even reset their stats after that happens, or right before that happens. So, you know, you're only helping people outside of the raid shield. What are you doing when the raid shield is up? Helping hand is the answer, but at that point, I've just listed 5 moves. That's skill swap, helping hand, swagger, superpower, and Terror Blast. And you can't use half of those if you're doing the other half of the strategy. If you're using superpower a whole lot, then you're just going far enough into the strategy that it doesn't matter if they have their ability or not. You've had it for 5 turns or something. If their ability is disastrous, they've probably already done disaster with it. Okay, and so if you do skill swap early on, you don't want to use superpower anymore. You probably don't even want to terrestrialize and use Terror Blast. Instead, you're just kind of there doing some damage, but you want to probably helping hand. So, yeah, it's weird stuff. Anyways, I'm just having fun training up Pokemon. Now I'm trying to catch the legendaries that are available in the Indigo Disc DLC. You know, I've got all the sweets from, or all the treats from What's-His-Face. I just need to go to the places and catch them all. And this time I'm not just catching everybody in only Ultra Balls. It's usually what I've done historically, but this time you only need to catch them once. Catch them in a ball that kind of matches. I think some people would be pissed off at the fact that I'm putting like Zapdos and Raikou in quick balls, but I like the yellow. And Raikou makes sense in a quick ball because the yellow and blue feels a little more Raikou-ish. But I digress. Anyways, that's a lot of stuff. Outside of that, you know, it's not sure what else I would talk about. I'll go ahead and wrap things up. Y'all, have a nice week and stay warm for those of you in the colder parts of the place, because I know it's kind of cold here. Yeah, take care.